Okay. Good morning. Let's try it again. Good morning.
Good morning.
Oh, that's better. So, did you enjoy the Bon Jovi concert yesterday? I wasn't there, so I just had to ask. Preparing for the demos today. We have a lot of demos to show you. So, welcome to this session about building adaptive companion apps for devices using SharePoint 2013. My name is Rune Zakariassen. I'm a program manager in Information Experiences Group in Microsoft SharePoint. And I have Manfred with me.
Yep, my name is Manfred Perry. I'm a senior dev lead in the same group. And I've been working with the REST interface as part of my work in 13.
That's true. So how many attended my search architecture session on Monday? Okay. So I hope you enjoy it. It's a little bit more airy here now than it was in that session. It was a little bit crowded. I got a lot of feedback or heat for that afterwards. But I hope you will enjoy this room. This is a developer session. So in case you're not a developer, now you're warned. We will show you live code here. We're going to develop applications, or at least one application, for Surface RT. Technically, this session is about the search API. So it's all about search. But the scenario we are talking about is much more than that. So we have picked one scenario, building companion applications, and we'll explain what that is for you, for a website that already exists in SharePoint. But just imagine, take a step back. This is just one of many scenarios you can use these interfaces for, these APIs for. You can integrate with line of business application. You can hook up to your existing web front-end investments. There is basically no limit to how we can use this API. And it has a lot of power, and we will only explore some parts of it today. So let's show you what we are going to talk about today. So the search REST APIs. It's more than one. It's actually a couple of companion APIs that goes with the REST API we will talk to you about. And then we are going to develop adaptive companion apps. So let's explain what adaptive really means. I guess you have seen it a lot, adaptive or search-driven, which is what it is about. It's about creating user interfaces that adapts to what the user is doing, trying to create more compelling user experiences. So that's the adaptive part. So companion, it's about having additional applications or apps for devices that goes with your SharePoint sites. Could be public-facing sites, as we have chosen today, the scenario today. But it can also be internal sites or line of business applications. Important it is to reuse the content and navigation across the channels and devices. So if you have an existing SharePoint site, we would like to reuse that, tap into that, and extract that information and content and use that in our device applications. And lastly, we would like to really tap into the power of search. And I hope you are starting to believe in the power of search by now. You've seen a lot of sessions, I hope, on search, to utilize promotions and recommendations in device applications, something we call editorial control. So let's go straight to it and give you the first demo. We'll start a little bit light here. We will show you an existing web storefront. It should be familiar to you by now. And afterwards, we will see how a companion app could look like. So this is Contoso Electronic Superstore. I hope you have seen it by now. And there is a couple of sessions at this conference that shows you how to build this site. And this site is totally driven by search. On the front page here, I would like you to pay attention to the navigation. This is what we call managed navigation, which is maintained in the taxonomy term store. At the bottom of the first page, we have favorites or most popular items, again also driven by search. Let's go into one of the categories, cameras. And here we basically get a lot of products in this application or this scenario. And everything here is basically a search result. And on the left side, we can tap into that, something that you might be familiar with from Search Center in SharePoint 2010, contextual refiners. Depending on what you have in your search results, we can help you navigate to what you would like to see. And, of course, more search results, and we can go into an item itself. And as you might also have learned in other sessions, we support variances, and with a product, also we have recommendations, interesting items that other users have bought together with this item. Now, imagine how could a companion app on a portable device, we have chosen Surface RT for this session, but it could be any device. What could that look like? So Manfred, why don't you show us?
Yes, it's a pleasure. So I'm using here my RT device to show you see it on the screen, what's actually displaying there. We have been doing, or trying, connectivity issues. Give me a second, please.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, now it comes. So I put it down so we have a little bit more stable here. So what we will do now in this session is to develop an app which uses all the investments which we have made in our website and use the same content on our devices again. We have been using RT as an example here. Everything which I'm going to show you here today is also doable on any other device which actually supports REST. So you can use Android, iOS, whatever you like. Rune is going a little bit deeper into the REST API afterwards. What's cool about using a device is you can really tap into the device capabilities. You can make a very touchable user interface. So if I show you the same as Rune has done, we can go into a category. For example, let's go into the computers here. You will see we have on the left side, we have the facets again. The facets are completely driven from our website again. So you see the same facets, the same names on our device again. You can then make a little bit more visually attractive. For example, you have the items here. We can, for example, just buy a laptop for my wife, which she likes a red one. And because I'm a cheap guy, I'm going for the cheap one. And maybe it's just because she needs it for surfing. Then you can, of course, do very cool stuff like build comparison of devices like that. And that's really easier to do on companion apps. And I think it broadens your exposure of your site. Good.
Super.
So that's what we're going to build today.
Yep, that's what it is. Sounds good? Okay, so let's take a step back and look at a couple of things we saw here. Now, everything is powered by search from SharePoint 2013. And all the content is, well, it doesn't have to be in SharePoint 2013, as we can't crawl content from other places. But it certainly helps, at least in this scenario where we have the product catalog that helps you drive this managed navigation so you can pay attention to your content, your taxonomy, and build up your managed navigation properties. And of course, with that, you get the web server that SharePoint 2013 brings with it, and you can show that user interface, build sites that show up in web browsers. Now, we are going to do the native part here, and you can see the REST API basically sits just directly on top of the search service and gives you all these capabilities. So anything you basically can do within SharePoint, you can do through this API. This API is really, really, really important. I mean, the client-side object model, the REST and OData, what we call the new endpoint, client-side object model for SharePoint 2013. It's more than just about creating device applications, really, because this is the endpoint that makes it possible to create applications that can span SharePoint installations, both on-premises and in the cloud. So it's basically a cloud application model. So, as you know, maybe, CSOM, or client-side object model from SharePoint 2010, comes with some client libraries that you have to hook into in order to tap into its power. We have the JavaScript, Silverlight, and .NET libraries. But what if you are on a device or a platform that does not support any of this? Then comes the REST APIs into play. Now, most of these REST APIs for SharePoint in 2013 is OData-based. And search is a little bit different than that. And that is actually by intention. So normally, when you go to an OData API, or in SharePoint 2013, you get back atom feeds. We have chosen to actually natively send you back the complex types directly. And the reason for that is because we intended these API to be used with implicit navigation, implicitly driving the user experience on your client. And then it needs to be fast. So we take away all this extra overhead of the atom feeds and give you the data directly. Now, how many of you have played with SharePoint 2013 from Beta 2? Okay, a couple. So there is one change we made from Beta 2 to the RTM release, and that is that the search API for any public-facing site that is open for anonymous, in Beta 2, the search API was also open. Now it's not. We have taken that away, so it's protected by default. In order to open that up, you basically have to create a template file that you put in a certain document library, query properties template. And this template file explains to SharePoint exactly what of the search parameters would you like to open up for anonymous users, and what kind of default values do you want them to have. And in addition to that, you have to use that in the REST calls to SharePoint to tell SharePoint which template file you would like to utilize to get it to respond. If you don't have this, the API will be closed down. So let's demo that a little bit as well. So here I have a REST call on top of here to really prove it's REST, HTTP GET. So we go to the same site and we decorate it with _API and search query. And then we can add any of the, I think it's 25 or 30 different search parameters. This is a really powerful API. We'll just use a couple of these properties now, or parameters now. So basically we are searching for any item with M400 in it. And then I add this query template that I already created. And then I get back search results. And here we go. So what you get back here is search result, which is a structure with several attributes and properties. So what I would like you to pay attention to is the primary query results. This is where you basically get the main results from the query back to you. Inside here, we have a couple of subtables. We have custom results, which can hold search results from typically federated searches on OpenSearch. I mean, you can search across Bing as well with this. Refinement results, which give us all the contextual refiners. And in this case, I didn't ask for that, so I only got the relevant results. And this is where I get all my search hits. It contains a row count, so you can see how many hits we have. We have 3 in this case, and you can also see total rows in total. So basically, that's what I have from this search result in the index. And I can also see how many I have, including duplicates. This is actually how many items is in the index, but we have removed the duplicates in this case. Going into the table, you can see the 3 elements. And here you have all the managed properties for each of the hits. So it's basically key value pairs, and it gives you OData typing. So you can parse this and typecast to what you need in your clients. I also have another REST call here, down at the bottom of the page. And the only thing I did here is just I added refiners. So these are the same refiner names that you would set up in your taxonomy term store, price and color in this case. And when I get the search results back here, basically the primary query results will contain both relevant results, minimum 3 hits, and the refiners. And the refiner is basically a hierarchy of color and, let's see, price. And prices I have already made buckets. So this is based on what I have in the search results. It should just be a few of them here. So we can see in a bucket here, less than 199, I have 4 items in the product catalog. So this is what you get back. So what we're going to do is take this data and create this application. Let's switch back again.
Yes, so let's come back to the app. Basically, what we really want to show you today is how to build app with what Rune showed you before. If you look at the app on the right side, and if I'm coughing, really sorry, I got a cold here in Las Vegas, which is funny because I'm from Norway. So I should be used to actually have a little bit fresh. So if I'm coughing, please, sorry about that. If you see on the right side, we have the SharePoint, we have the API, and on the left side, we have a component called WinRT Search Client. This client will be available for download for your help as an example pretty soon. This is really just the part which builds up the REST query, does the REST request, and does the deserialization into an object model. So it's easier to work against an object model. We will ship that for WinRT and some other .NET libraries. If you use iOS, or for example, in iOS 5, you have the JSON dynamic provider, I think it's called, something like that. You can also use that to do pretty much the same pretty easily. So we will not look too much into that. I will show you a little bit code about it, but that's not that interesting. Then we have the search service. That's the part we're going to write today. So we are going to build up the queries which we use for our companion apps. And we will show how navigation works together with search, how you do analytic search, and how you do, what's the last one? Editorial control. So basically getting query rules into our apps as well.
Yeah, that's correct.
And then on the left side, that's really all WinRT specific. We're also not going to look into that. We are not a WinRT session here. That's really just managing the data, make it bindable to the SAML, and all the stuff behind it. So I have to use this one. So that's what we are going to show today. The app itself, you will be able to download, not directly after the session, but we will post a link to the downloadable code on our tag from the session. Good. I already mentioned we are first going to integrate with the SharePoint navigation. We want to get the navigation out of SharePoint to display our navigation in our app. Then we want to do a product category search, basically just get the item back on a certain category. If we navigate into laptops, for example, we only want to get laptops. But we also want to have the whole navigation available on our device. Then we are showing two examples on how you can use analytics. We're going to show most popular and item-to-item recommendations. That's a huge area, and these are really just two examples. To explore everything, you have to attend another session. I don't have to name it, but it's on the end of the slides.
Yeah, it's at the end of the slide deck.
Yeah. And then we're going to use usage events. So basically, if you want to use analytics and you also want to give feedback to your analytics engine, you have to send log events. So you have to basically stream the analytics engine. And then we're going into editorial control. Everything we're going to do today is using GET, except the usage events. But if you have a very long REST string and you're running out of your HTTP request string size, we also support POST on all of these methods. And the last bit is basically tabbing into editorial control. Good. Let's start with navigation. So what we want to do is basically get the navigation out of SharePoint. And in case of a search-driven site, it's called managed navigation. Navigation is driven by a term store. And on the left side, you see the same navigation as it's displayed on the screen. To get out the navigation, there is an endpoint called menu state. And we have to give him the map provider name as a parameter. And you have to specify which navigation provider in SharePoint you are actually, or which navigation provider is used in SharePoint. In case of a search-driven site, it's always the global navigation switchable provider. Right, so then we want to get the same navigation in our app, as you see below. If we do that, you will get an XML back again, which Rune has shown you the rest before. This one is a small snippet of navigation REST response. So what you see, you have the category, you have keys in it, and I'm coming back to what we're using them for. And yeah, that's really it. So I think we just switch to the demo and show you how to do that in code. Can you switch? Oh, actually, switch to 7 first. So I started now the app with a blank page. So basically, I compiled it while Rune was talking in, with basically nothing on this app. So you see it's completely empty right now. And that's the code we are going to work on right now.
That's right.
So here you see we have the SharePoint search service, which I was mentioning before. And in our application for a demo, we right now just return an empty or a dummy task. We wait 500 milliseconds and return. So basically, we don't get anything back. So we're going to replace that now with some more interesting code. Stop there. Can you see it on the screen, or shall I zoom it in?
Is it okay? Good.
Yep. Good. What you see now is we are using this client library, which I mentioned before, which you can download afterwards. Let's go into that and just see what that is really doing. It's really not doing a lot. It's building up the REST request. So we have the menu state as an endpoint. Depending on the properties we pass in, he sets the parameters. We are doing some caching, which is always good if you have a client app, because the network latencies, it's good to cache it locally. And then if we don't have it in the cache, we basically set up the HTTP web request. We send the request. We use deflate and zip if it's available. And then we do a deserialization on the screen into an object model. So that's really all which is going on here, just to see that I'm not cheating here. So what we do now is basically taking that out as well. We are calling this endpoint with this switchable provider, as mentioned before. The depth we actually don't need as well. We just ignore it. And the rest we can just define if you want to have force a refresh from the backend, or if you want to use the cached version if it's available. So let's start that and see what happens in our application.
Very cool. Compiling and installing.
Compiling and installing. It sometimes takes a little while because we use the wireless network and it's a little bit unstable. Oh, cool. But see what we have now. We have navigation here. So we have used the semantic zoom control, and we can just navigate through the application now. What you might notice now is that different to the demo before, you don't see any images, right? That's on purpose, because we don't want to really store the images on our device. We want to get the images from SharePoint. And now I should switch back.
Oh yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So we want to get the images back from SharePoint, because SharePoint should really manage all our resources which we want to show in our application. Because it could be that somebody is adding new navigation entries, and then we don't want to update our app. So we want to get the images back from our app, or from SharePoint directly. The way to do that is to use something called properties in the term store. So in your navigation term store, you can define custom properties, which you can return back from SharePoint into your application. In the slide here, you see they are called local properties. What you can do is just define a key. So in our example, we say it's an F image. And we define a URL with a category image. And then we also have something called, or added something called sysfacet full refinement string.
What is this, Manfred?
That's an interesting one. There are some system properties in the navigation term store. And one of them is called, as here written here, sysfacet full refinement string. This one is returning the contextual refiners on a certain category. So if I'm, for example, in laptops, it will tell me which navigators I have to actually fetch from search. So this is really the combination between navigation and search.
Okay, so this will give you both the menu structure and also the contextual refiners for each category.
Yeah, let's have a look at what it gives back. So if I do this request again, and I have highlighted the interesting part here, I get back the nav image as a property in the property back, and it specifies which URL I should use for the category images. One interesting thing here is the question mark width equals 100. And that's really using the feature image rendition in SharePoint. So if you have an image which is like 1024 in size or in width, you can say, I just want to have it back as with a width of 100.
Sounds useful if you are developing an app both for a smartphone with a small real estate and, in this case, a tablet with a bigger real estate, and you would like to have different image sizes, right?
Definitely, and we also want to save space. We don't really want to send down megabytes of data, so we can really adjust that parameter for our companion apps. And below you see it returns us which facets we want to return from search, or we need to return to ask for when we do a REST request. In this example, for example, we see that we need to get red price and red brand back. Good. If you want to have some more information about the image rendition, then you should look at this session. It's already over, but there are recordings on it. So let's add this custom property and see what happens then. Okay, here it is. So now I just add the custom properties with what you saw before, this string for the faceted navigation, the navigation images. And if we compile that again and start application, what we'll see is that we also get the images back. The faceted navigation I'm coming back to later on. We don't use them right now, but we'll come back to that. So you can just switch to that. So now it's compiling again, and it's deploying the app onto our device. That unfortunately takes a little time.
You have network issues?
Network issues here.
I guess you've heard that before, right? Always the scary thing for doing demos.
Let me try once more, otherwise I will just start it on this screen.
Yep.
Because it's a Windows 8 device, I also can actually compile it. I don't have to really deploy it on our Surface device.
You're actually been compiling to the real device here, even if you cannot see it, but we can also use the emulator.
Should be up. Okay, let's go back to the screen and I'll just do the demo on locally. So I'm switching from remote to my local machine. I'm using, let's use the release and start it from here. I hope he's not playing tricks on me right now.
Oh.
Yeah, now it's coming up. Good.
Wow, super.
So now you see we have the images in place, and we can use the semantic zoom to dive into the categories. Now this stuff is still empty here. So let's go back to that. So the next thing we want to do is to actually fill the categories. So if we click into one of the main categories or subcategories, we want to get the items back. We call that product category search. To do that, I would like to explain you a little bit more on how search-driven sites and product catalogs actually work together with navigation. So on the left side here, you see that edit screen of one product item. And on the bottom there, you see something called an item category. This item category is bound to the taxonomy term store into the product hierarchy. So you can basically tag any product item anywhere in the hierarchy and move it around like that, right? And what we want to do is basically get out all the items which are tagged with laptops. So if you index that item, and the naming I'm using here can be wrong because it depends on how you actually map the crawl properties to manage properties, and there are other sessions on that. But you can imagine you have, in this case, we have a managed property called product catalog item category, and it's indexed with the term item, with the term GUID from the navigation, actually. And if you do look back to the node state again, at some point you saw there was a GUID in there. So what we now have is we have two term GUIDs which are equal in the navigation and in search. So what we have to do now is basically combine them if we search. So basic query we already saw. But what we will do now is use this manage property, dash, and then the GUID. And in this case here, you also see a hash mark in front of the GUID. That really indicates that I also want to have all subcategories from this current category. If I don't have the dash, I only get laptops. If I have the dash and I have a subcategory in the taxonomy, I also get them back. That's what we want to do here. Then, in addition, you also want to define which selected properties you want to have returned from search. Because by default, you get a set, but you might not have included your properties you want to display on your screen. For example, by default, you might not get the price. And then you have to define here, I also want to get back the price from search. And the last one, we also want to have the refiners back. And the refiners we saw before in the navigation example, we call it contextual refiners. We get this string back from navigation. We don't really have to care what's in this string. We just have to send that into search again. So we have to take that string from the navigation and put it into this refiner property. If we combine that all together, switch again. So I'm going to add some code here. And you don't want to see me typing, I'm sure. So I'm just putting in some code here, and we will walk through it. So basically, in this method, we get in the current catalog category. So if we navigate around, we keep that as state in our application. So if you move into laptops, I get the laptop node into this method. That really defines me which category I'm in. And then I'm building up this query string here. So in our case, the managed properties has some weird name, but we use the managed property, dash, hash, and the category ID, which we get passed in here. So that's what we really search in here.
And all this information you basically got back from the navigation structure, right?
Yes.
Yep.
And then we also get the refinement string. This one is really coming back from navigation. We don't have to care how it looks. So if you take the navigation, or the values, which is called sus underscore nav full string something, and just add that to refiners properties. And also we have to pass in, if you already apply a refiner, we have to pass in which refiners we have applied. Because you can apply multiple refiners. You can, for example, say, I want to have a red laptop in a certain price segment. And we have to pass that into search, so we actually get only the results back for that. Good, and then let us start the application again. And what we will see here now is basically we have a full-fledged search experience. We have now the navigation. We can drill into a category. We get items for certain categories, and we get the facets.
Wow, that's only 2 calls, and
That's
basically
2
you
calls.
almost got everything you need for your application.
That's correct. So now we have the facets here on the left side, and we have all the items here. Actually, we also can already drill into this item, because we don't do an additional search. In the first search, we also get the items which we need to display, for example, description, specifications, overview. So we have basically everything in place.
And these are all managed properties, right? Crawl properties mapped to managed properties. And as long as you know the name, you can get anything out.
That's it.
And this is basically what we mean by search-driven user interfaces, search-driven content, content by search.
So here, for example, that's an HTML snippet, which we just indexed. You can mark the product catalog in columns that you should not strip HTML out, for example, and we can just use that again. Good, but now we have here some item recommendations. That's something we also want to have, right? So let's now look back to analytic search. I was mentioning before, analytics is a huge area. Currently, in 2013, you can integrate with Facebook. It's really powerful. For sake of simplicity, we decided to just look at 2 examples. One of them is most popular searches based on views. So if somebody views a product, it gets a certain count. Depending on the spread of people viewing this item, it gets higher up in the stack. And then also item-to-item recommendations. Bruno, do you want to tell a little bit about recommendations?
Yes, absolutely. So you can also hook up your custom events here. It depends entirely upon your application, really. So, but a typical example in this case would be that you basically offer an opportunity for your customers or your users to log on to Facebook with their Facebook ID. And as long as you have a Facebook application identifier, you can actually tap into their profile, if you like. Or you can just track Facebook likes. But then if you feed that information back to the analytics engine through an event stream, the analytics engine is then able to do item-to-item recommendations for you. So you get all that for free. And the only thing you have to do is register your customer event, and you can have up to 12 of those. Make sure that you feed the events back to the search service. We have a separate API for that. And then you can search for recommendations by the recommendation for managed property. And we also had a session on Tuesday. You might want to watch the recording on that one to see it.
So these are the 2 examples we're going to show today. Rune mentioned we can just use the managed property called recommended for, and you pass him the item ID you want to have recommendations for. And then basically you're done. You get recommended items. As easy as that. For most popular searches, you can just, in this case, we limit the content to a certain group of items, to not really include also pages on your site. So we just say the content type of the catalog, to limit it to the catalog. And we sort the result with the view's recent property in a descending order. All the details about that can be really...
It's all available on the web.
Right?
Yeah. Everything is documented on the web.
So let's do item recommendations then.
So as Manfred prepares there, basically recommendation is nothing less than another search where you just specify recommended for attribute or do sorting.
So here again, it's pretty similar to what we did before. In this method, we have the possibility to switch between recommended for and most popular searches. In the recommended for, we again just construct a query, which looks like that. So we get the item ID passed into the method. And for the most popular search, we just set a sort list or the sort parameter of the REST request. We set it to this view's recent and in this descending order and limit it to a certain set of results. And doing that really gives us now 2 things on our application. The first thing you will see is the most popular on the left side of the application, which we put onto the home screen, but you can place it wherever you want. Because of real estate on this smaller screens on the pads, we decided to do that. And if you drill into an item, you will get item-to-item recommendations.
Oh, see there, popular items.
So you see we have now popular items on the left side. And let's go to laptops and drill into one of those. First one here. And here we have item recommendations.
It's quick, huh? Actually, what you saw here, when we open this page, we issued a search query. It's that quick. And this is really important. This is the reason why we don't use atom feeds, but return strongly typed custom types directly to you.
Good. So the next thing, we also want to instrument the analytics from our app. In the web page, it's done automatically. If you use a CBS web part, for example, in our application, we have to do that part manually. So we have to send in some usage events to the analytics engine. This is the only call we have to do post, and that's just how it is. But it's an easy post event, right? You have just to specify the usage entry. You have to give it event type ID, which again is, you get more information if you read up on analytics. You have to specify the item ID, which is used for the algorithm, but usually use the same item ID as you use in your catalog. You can pass in the site to limit these recommendations only for a certain site collection, for example. And you can even scope it down to have just a sub-site. And you have to give him some user identification. And that's very important. I think that's the most important part in this REST call. This user ID has to be unique. For analytics to be able to actually get patterns, we have to have a unique user ID. That doesn't mean we have to have a user ID from SharePoint. It can be basically anything as long as it's unique. So you can basically just, when you start up your application, generate a GUID, store it in your application, and use that going forward. It makes sense to have at least the same user ID for a session. You can even change it if you start up the app again. Doesn't really matter. As long as you have unique entries from different users, we are all good.
Yeah. And this also works in anonymous scenarios where you actually don't know the user. You just have to create something unique for that session. The important thing is that recommendations engine or the analytics engine needs a unique identifier to track all the events from that user, which we use to identify experts, which again identify what items to recommend when you view something.
Good. Now let's look at the event logging. So in our case, we just used the hardware ID from the device to generate a unique ID. And then we send in this as part of the user ID. All the rest here is really just the site GUID, which we also get from navigation. And the item ID, which is the item ID from the product we're looking at. And there is really not much I want to show you here in detail, because basically you don't see anything in your application which is happening, right? It's everything in the background. You basically do a post request, but the user doesn't really notice. You could, if you want to see that what's really happening, you can use Fiddler, for example. But I'm not going to go into that. So that doesn't make sense to actually start that application right now.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. So, Manfred, when we created this Controls Electronics Superstore web front, we also used editorial control to give promotions.
Right.
So I actually have already created a query rule. I will not go into details of how I set up that, because we have a dedicated deep dive session on query rules, but I did it. So I will show you how it works. So it was actually one of the phones. I gave a discount for that and promoted it. So let's have a look on the website how that looks like.
Yeah.
So here we have the website again. I can go to no, it was phones. And go into mobile phones. And we should see, yeah, here we see it. The special deal. This is a query rule. I haven't seen you have the support for that in your application yet. Can you do that?
That's right. Yes, of course we can do that. Let's see how we can do that. I'm not going to go to explain on how query rules really work, because that's, again, a big thing. What I want to say here is that we have to make sure in our client application that the rule is triggered. So we have to know which query rules triggering mechanisms we're using in our web front end. In this case, we are using the term ID and term set ID of the category. So we basically say we want to have a promotion in a certain category for a certain item. To trigger that, we do it with the term ID and the term set ID.
Yeah, basically, that's what I did in the query rule. I just gave the search engine a command to send back some additional information for this product and put it on the top of a search result. That was all I did. And you have to pick up that information, right?
Yep. So, because we know now that we match on the term ID and the term set ID, we basically just have to pass that part into part of our REST query. And to do that, we can use something called properties. So we can set a property value with the term ID and dash, and then our category ID. If you do not that, we should really get now the recommendations back the same way as we do in the web application.
So all you needed to know was what the name of the property I sent in.
Yes.
Okay. Let's go to mobile phones then.
Mobile phones, it was right.
Yep. Oh,
Yes.
there you go.
Now here it is.
Top of the search results. Thank you. I guess we're going to sell a lot of those.
Yep. Good. I mean, that was really the application by itself. You have seen now, we have built up a companion app with a few simple queries. I think it's just important that you understand how navigation works together with search, how you can use analytics and how to use it right. And if you do that, you can build your companion apps in a very, very simple way. The REST interface is extremely powerful, we think. And you can do a lot more than what we have shown you here. You can use different properties. You can use analytics properties. You can use synonyms. So basically, just have a go look at the REST interface and all the properties you can set and start playing with it.
Absolutely. So that was the application. There's a couple of things to know that I think is important for you to know as well if you're going to develop these kind of applications. As I said, these are search results, and we're using it directly, implicitly into the user experience. So we need it to be quick. And for that, we have a couple of tricks for you. So when I used it in the browser, made a REST call in the beginning of the session, I got XML back. That's the default. But I can also get JSON back. That actually saves you 10% payload just by adding the accept header application JSON. Now, you also have to add OData verbose here. The reason for that is we are using a pretty fresh version of OData, and we are also going to give an even more efficient version of OData later when that comes around. In the meantime, you have to use this OData verbose. When that improvement comes, you should see this dropping even further, maybe 70, 80% smaller even. In addition to that, request only, as Manfred did, request only the managed properties you need in your application. Because by default, I think you will get back 40 or 50 default managed properties in your search results. And if you don't need all of those, just reduce it to the ones you need. And that will save you a lot of bandwidth as well. In order to do that, you have to use bypass result types equals true, and then you have to just use the select properties parameters of the search interface. If you do that, you will get it reduced. In addition, we also support compression by default with SharePoint 2013. So just add accept encoding, gzip or deflate, any of your choosing, or both, and you will get a compressed result back to you. By using these, you are basically reducing the payload by 90%. And that can make a big difference. And if you're on a metered connection, like you are on a smartphone, that can be a big deal for your customers as well. Also optimize for fluid user interfaces. As you can have seen in Manfred's code, he cached on the client side. Now, that sample code we will make available for you shortly. So it's not about the performance of the search APIs itself, because as you saw, they are quite performant. I mean, we're talking about a couple of 100 milliseconds here. It's about network connections itself. So you might have, we're talking about internet here on smartphones and tablets, so it can be a little bit glitchy. So having caching protects you against that. And lastly, really adopt the new asynchronous patterns, as you can have seen from Windows Phone 7.5 and 8, and in Windows 8. In C# we saw here async await. This makes the user interface responding, even though we are doing back-end requests and calls to SharePoint. Lastly, we are also going to share with you another sample called SearchPad. This is a sample we made that is inspired by Fiddler. It allows you to enter search results and really explore what's going on down on the wire. So let's have a look at that. So I hope you can see this. Might be a little bit small, but basically what I have done here, I've told it this tool here, and we will release it with the source code so you can have a look at it. Basically, I tell it the SharePoint endpoint, and I tell it to return JSON. I turn off authentication, and I'm telling it to use the anonymous template. I can also, of course, also authenticate and use it internally. And then basically I just fill in a property, query text here, M400, and I submit the query. And as you can see here, basically we now can look into what's going on the wire. This is an HTTP GET request. You can see the JSON header here, or you can browse the headers. And down at the bottom, we get the raw results if you would like to explore that one. Tap into the headers that you get back from SharePoint. And this is where you can see how this compression and play with the compression. I haven't turned it on here, but you can play with that as well. And we have a JSON Explorer here as well, so you can just look at all the search results. We give you statistics, so you can look at that. And you can play with select properties and really reduce the payload size that goes over the wire. And you can then, of course, browse the search results. And as you see, we have primary query here. This is also a good opportunity to tell you what is this secondary query thing. Now, primary queries is what you get is the results you get back, mainly when you issue your search query. But we have this query rules thing. And query rules may add something to your normal search results, but query rules may also execute additional queries with additional results. And if you know the search object model from SharePoint is a result table collection, everything here is the same thing. You just have put them together in so you know which result tables belongs together. So every result table you get back that belongs to a particular search query comes in the secondary query results. And that makes it very easy for you as a developer to navigate to the result table you want without you have to look into these different GUIDs and user IDs and everything to identify your correct result table. As you can see here, we have a query, and you can have multiple query results here. And here we have some custom results. And in this case, this is actually table of personal favorite results, what we get back. Okay, so that's the search pad. And we can switch back again. Okay, so let's recap here a little bit. So here we have seen SharePoint search. Oops.
Sorry.
You scared me.
Really sorry.
We have seen the SharePoint Search REST APIs, and it's more than one. It's, of course, the Search Query API, which has a lot of power, and we have only explored a couple of them. In addition to that, we have the Navigation REST APIs, which is basically what gives you the managed navigation stack and how that connects to search results. We have also seen how we can use the same search API to get back recommendations by two different ways, one by sorting and another way by using the recommended for managed property. And lastly, even though we haven't seen it executing, because basically it's a post and there's no UI to it, we also use the user event logging, which is important to give feedback to the analytics engine in SharePoint to really be able to calculate the recommended items for you and your customers. We have seen the companion app, and yeah, well, it runs here. We might even show it a little bit more. I think you have the final application there, so we can browse through it again if you want to. Okay, yeah, we lost connection. I'm sorry for that. We also saw how we actually reuse content. All the content we saw in the device application is the same content that drives that SharePoint website. As long as you get it into the index, you can share it with everybody.
And again, here I think it's important to notice it's really not only about catalog and public-facing sites. You can also cover internet scenarios. You might have a news feed, or you might actually connect news feeds from different site collections and put that together and expose that in your companion app. That's also a scenario which you could think of, right? We have been using the public-facing website and the catalog because it's a nice showing. It's easy to show, everybody understands it, it's nice images. But you can really use it for anything which is search-driven sites or which uses search as the driver, which can be a news federation application. You make it up, right?
Or line of business applications. And we do support all the authentication regimes as you see in SharePoint 2013. I mean, forms-based, cookies, what have you, like OAuth, it's all there, even though now we just explored the anonymous part of it. And we also saw how we could reuse the navigation, which is in the taxonomy terms store. Lastly, we did a trick with query rules, which I already made. I cheated a little bit there, and gave you promotions. And you can see that it's the same promotion that is now showing on your public-facing website as it is showing on your Surface RT application.
And here also, you could, for example, think of scenarios where you want to have only certain query rules triggered for your device. That's completely doable because you basically can tap into the capabilities of your device. You have location, for example, as a part of it. So you can take out the location, send that back with search, and just make a query rules which actually triggers for certain devices. For example, just for iPads, only for Surfaces, or only for companion apps in general, but not really show that on the UI. So you're extremely flexible on mixing and matching there.
And trying to take a step back here to really see what this can be used for. Basically, what we are doing now is we are turning SharePoint into a business management tool, where you are actually managing the user experience both on your SharePoint sites and on devices. Because when I changed anything inside SharePoint in the search results, adding a query rule, all those millions of customers out there with their phones or their tablets or what have you will automatically be updated and take part into that new user experience whenever you want it to. Because they basically execute search queries. So we have a couple of hands-on labs that we think is interesting in the context of this REST API. I don't think there is any of these that really taps into the REST API, but it shows you how you can use the SharePoint features to get content into the search index and how to get it out again. How to build a product-centric site, for instance, teaches you the things you need to know in order to build that Contoso electronic super site. Introduction to search tells you a little bit about the same thing we have used here. And exploring search query rules. So it's really where the power is when it comes to moderation and editorial control. And these are sessions. Most of them have been done already. And we had a parallel session to this one, Grow Your Business Online with SharePoint Adaptive Experiences. That shows, really goes into depth about that public-facing website. And we have gone into depth about how to use the Search API to build companion apps. But you might want to watch the recordings here later on. And lastly, don't forget to give us those great scores. I mean, you have heard this before, right? That the number 5 really means okay, doesn't it? So, in case you don't like it, come and talk to us before you give us that eval. And if you really liked it, give us those 5s, because we really love those 5s. So, thank you so much. I really hope you enjoyed it. And then we are open for questioning.